Last tutorial, we have seen how to create an Angular 2 project using Angular CLI. Today, let's see how to navigate through the project and read the JSON files, the system configuration files that Angular CLI gives us along with the Angular 2 project. So if you remember, we created an Angular 2 project in the last tutorial. So let me show you where we ended last time. So let's go into the project, and this is what we did in our last tutorial. So basically all that it does is we have an app running in this particular location. So let me just copy and go into Safari, paste, and just run it. So it says app works. So now let's see what exactly we have inside this particular project. So I'll kill this session here. So if you see here, we have few files listed down. Let me open this in Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code is a very good editor for Angular 2. There are some other tools also available. It's your personal choice. I generally prefer using Visual Studio Code. Let me open the project. Okay, that's the project. Okay, so if you see here, so we have few really interesting JSON files and some JS files. So you must be wondering what these JSON and JS files are. So today we are going to take a look at each of these files. So let's start off with package.json. So you can call this as the heart of your program because this is where all your node module packages will be specified. For example, let's say I'm specifying like I'm gonna use 2.2.3 version of my at angular/common package, and I'm specifying all the versions and the packages that I want to use within my project here. So when you run ng-serve to start your app, it basically, so your Angular 2 will look into this particular file package.json, and it starts installing all this stuff if you don't already have it in your machine under node modules package. So this is where all these dependencies gets installed, and once you have them, so now if you see here, there are a couple of interesting things here. So there is something called a script start ng-serve. So this is the command that gets initiated if you run npm start at the command line instead of ng-serve. So you can do that. So you can name whatever you want here and it happens. Same thing with your, so if you want to run tests, just run ng test and protractor. So yeah, we'll take a look at all these things in a while. Uh, so yeah, let's see a couple of very important things in this particular JSON file. One is the dependencies and the other one is dev dependencies. So you must be wondering what these two different things are and why do we have to separate these two things. You don't actually need to, but the main difference is dependencies are something that you want as part of your code and when you deploy it into a particular onto a different server. So you need all these things going along with your code, whereas your dev dependencies will only help you to develop the code. For example, your compiler CLI, you only need it to compile your code. You don't need this to run the code. Your Jasmine meant for your tests, your unit tests. So there are your Angular CLI helps you in building your code and creating yeah, it basically helps you in easy development of Angular 2. And so most of these things you don't need them as part of your final build, so you will add all the things that you don't want as as part of your final build into your dev dependencies, whereas rest of the stuff that you want to be part of your code will be added under dependencies. So that's about package.json. Uh, so we can actually do quite a lot of things under package.json, but we'll take a look at them in our later sessions. So let me jump into angular-cli.json. So this is something that you have already used. So to create this project, we used Angular CLI. So now let's take a look at this, what exactly this is. So they are specifying like which exact project version of Angular CLI we are using, and it says what should be the root folder. So basically src is the root folder, and what should be the output directory. Right now I don't have the output directory here. You will have one once you create a build. For example, if you run ng build, you will see this dist folder which contains all the final HTMLs and JS files that you want, and the assets. So basically all your images, or it can be your JavaScript files, or it can be anything. So all that kind of stuff goes into your assets folder. You just have to specify what exactly, so what you are naming your assets folder as. So this says like, okay, you have to name it as assets, and your index file is going to be index.html, your main file is going to be main.ts. So let's take a look at this file in a while. Yeah, even the same with this one. So we'll take a look at this file also. So basically main.ts is the file from where the execution starts. Same. So yeah, I'll talk more about this. uh, and your ts config dot, yeah, it's a TypeScript configuration file, and your prefix with app. So basically if you look at this particular folder, all the components are prefixed with app. So that's what it actually means. If you don't want it, you can actually take it off. And this says whether you are developing this particular application for your mobile or for uh, a laptop, or yeah, what kind of an application is this. So yeah, so we are not developing this for a mobile, so I've specified this as false. And what's the style sheet that I'm going to use? So by default it's styles.css. You can change it to whatever you want. Same thing with your scripts. If you have any scripts, you can add them here. And the environments, so you can specify, for example, I want different configurations to go into different environments. Let's say I want to connect to a database called A in my dev environment, whereas database called B in my prod environment. uh, so now I have to specify the database details separately for two different environments, so I can actually configure them in my environment.ts file. I'll go through this particular file in a while. And if there are any add-ons, you can add them here, any packages, any extra packages. And E2E is basically end-to-end tests. So Angular CLI basically uses a protractor uh, for protractor internally uses Selenium, and then tests. So these are your unit tests. Um, so we use Karma for your unit tests. Karma internally uses Jasmine. And the defaults. So you can specify whether it's a SCSS file or a CSS file. That's so what kind of style sheet are you basically using, and prefix interfaces, inline. So basically these are all about, has something to do with your code format and the code documentation, or the specifications, whether you want them or not. So that's about Angular CLI.json. So let's go into karma.conf.js. So before I go there, let me show you where you have already come across karma. So tests says karma in it. So basically it means you want to run unit tests using karma. So this basically goes into karma.conf.js file to look at the configurations. So if you go into this, you will see all the configurations here, but the most important thing that you have to look at is which particular framework you are going to use. So just remember one thing, you're not going to change these files unless you desperately want to for some really big reason. Generally, we don't change these files at all. You just use them as is, so you don't need to worry too much about this. So yeah, for example, in your project you might be using Firefox or Internet Explorer. uh, you can actually configure your tests to run on Firefox or Internet Explorer, and you can even configure it to run on multiple browsers at a time if you want to. But just make sure that you are including the right package up here. If it's Chrome, it's going to be Chrome. If it is Firefox, just make sure that you are including Firefox there. And uh, yeah, let me go into the next file called protractor. So let me go back to angular-cli.json. Let's see where we have already seen protractor. So for end-to-end tests, we are using protractor configuration file. So let's go into protractor. So protractor basically is used for our end-to-end tests, and this specifies what the base URL is going to be for your end-to-end tests. So here we are assuming that you will run your tests in your local, your end-to-end tests in your local. So that's the reason you will see localhost. And yeah, we are using Jasmine again. So yeah, basically we rarely modify all these files, so you don't need to be too much worried about this. And let's go into tslint.json. This basically is for your code formats, how the code should look like, and you can define some rules here. For example, let me take a look at one of the rule here: maximum line length. So if it goes beyond 140 lines, sorry, 140, yeah, if the number of characters exceeds 140 in a particular line, it starts showing me a warning in my code. So yeah, that's what tslint does for you. So you can actually configure what exactly you want to be shown as warnings within your code. So that's about most of the important JSON and JS files that you have here in the parent folder. Now let me go into the source folder. So you have app folder where your code resides, and the assets folder where you can put all your documents or your images and all that stuff, and your environments file. So this is where you will configure your environment. Let's say if you are in the dev mode, and you can specify like production is false. So this is basically a variable which can be accessible from outside this particular file. I can show you in a while how to access this particular value. And let's see this one. uh, so here it says production value as true. So if your system loads environment.prod.ts, then your production variable is going to be true. Whereas for this one, your production value is going to be false. And as I said earlier, so main.ts is one of the initial launching points for Angular 2 application. So if you see, so your bootstrap module, so this is where your app gets started off with. So it's basic, it's the app module. Uh, so we'll talk more about modules in our later sessions. I'm not gonna go deep into this. I'll just walk you through the files that we have here for now in this particular session. So main.ts, just remember, so okay, if you see this, so we are accessing the production variable from these files here. So if you see it, yeah, that's how we access the variable. And if it says prod, then so if the production value is true, then it goes and enables the prod mode. So yeah, we'll talk more about this. And let me go into, so yeah, you just don't need to be worried too much about these files right now. The polyfills files, this is just a style sheet, and the test file. So I'll talk about test.ts when I am talking about karma or the unit tests, and the TypeScript configuration file and the typings.d.ts file, so which you don't really need to be worried too much about. So with this, I'll conclude this particular session, and we'll talk more about modules in our next session. Thank you so much for watching.